Hi, and welcome to this GameMaker tutorial. Today we're going to be coding a text box that receives input from the user, and then this input can be used for pretty much anything you want. Most commonly it's used for storing a name, aka the name of the player. This is sort of aimed towards beginner to intermediate GameMaker programmers. So without further ado, let's get started. I created this in GameMaker 1.4, but all this code is easily ported over to 2.0. So here we have this little name tag. That's not really important. If we click in here, then the box gets highlighted and this little blinking cursor appears. And if we click out, then we can't type anything. But if we click back in, then we can type in the string that will make our name. I'll call mine Hello World. The outside rectangle is based on the color that you specify here, but we're not going to implement anything like that. And then if I hover over here, we get this little cursor that sort of says, hey, you can type here. And if you hover out, then it turns back into a mouse. I mentioned the blinking cursor, I think. One other thing is that you can't type over this box, which is good if you want it to be a specific number of characters for whatever reason for your game. And that's pretty much all the behaviors of the box. So without further ado, let's get started with coding this. So the first thing we want is we want to start a new project. So I'm just going to do that here. And then we want GameMaker language. And this is going to be I'm going to call it text box, but you can call it whatever you want. So what do we need? Well, we already have a room. It gives us one by default. So let's create an object. And this object doesn't need to have a sprite. We're just going to call it text box. If I can type correctly. You can do this with a sprite. You could just make a little .png of a box and then link it up to your object and then draw it in the world as you normally would. But we're not going to do that because GameMaker already has functions for drawing rectangles. So I figured that would just be easier. But like I said, it's up to you. So let's drag this object over into the world before we forget. And you can see when that little question mark is in there, that means it doesn't have a sprite. Let's go back to our object. Oh, and for beginners, this stuff down here, don't worry about this right now. Persistent just means that it's going to exist as you move across rooms. But we only have one room, so that's not really a problem. And also this isn't a real game, so. But if you make a global variable, then that's also going to exist throughout the room. So if you store the name in a global variable, that'll work the same way. And that way, when you switch rooms, you don't have to worry about that data going away. So we're going to need 3 different events here. We're going to need a create event. We're going to need a draw event. And we're going to need a step event. If I can find it. There it is. So you can actually put all the code from your step event in the draw event, because I believe that the draw event is executed every time step runs, but we're just going to separate them here so that it looks a little cleaner. Okay, so create. So what do we need when this object is created? Well, we need a way to store the name of the player. And when it's first created, we want that string to be empty. A string is just a line of text for beginners. So we're just going to call it name, and we're going to set it equal to nothing, just these blank quotes. And you don't really want to put any spaces in between here because that's going to be treated as an extra character. So don't do that. Okay, for our draw event, let's get started drawing the rectangle. It's good to put some comments in your code, so let's do that. Draw the rectangle, the box for input. Beautiful. Okay, so we're going to use a built-in GameMaker function for drawing the rectangle. It's going to be called draw rectangle color, because we want to specify what kind of color we want. And it gives us way too many arguments for color, but that's life. So you can see down here all the different arguments. X1 is the left side of the box, Y1 is the top, X2 is the right side of the box, Y2 is the bottom. And I only know that because I've done that a million times, use this function, but if you middle click on it, then it brings up this documentation for the function. It's going to tell you everything you need to know, but I'm going to walk you through it. So where do we want the left side of the box to be? Well, let's kind of put it in the middle of the screen and then shift it over a little bit. So we have a way of writing that using some built-in variables for GameMaker. So let's do room width, built-in function that tells us how big our room is basically across, divided by 2, minus 100. We'll shift it over. And then the top side of the box, that's going to be room, height, divided by 2. And then it's going to be minus 100 because the screen increases in pixels as you go down. That's just the way GameMaker does it. And then let's make the right side of the box room width over 2 plus 100. And then for the bottom of the box, we want it to be room height over 2 plus 100. So this is going to make actually, if you're smart, or if you've been paying attention, a square. So we're going to want that changed eventually, but let's just get this running first. So what color do we want our box to be? Let's make it white. Okay, let's copy and paste some of these because it's given us so many arguments. One, two, three, four. Yep. Outline. So if you put true here, then it's going to just be an outline for your rectangle. It's not going to fill it in. So we want this to be false because we want the whole thing. Okay. Let's run it. Beautiful. We have a beautiful, beautiful square. So how do we make this more like a rectangle? Well, let's make it longer and we'll make it shorter as well. We'll make the width longer and the height shorter. So how do we do that? Let's do this minus 300 plus 300. And let's just leave it like that because that'll make it all stretched. Still too fat. So let's make it less fat. So let's make it minus 50. How's that sound? Room height plus 50. Run. That looks nice. Okay. Now what do we want to do? Well, let's make sure that the game is storing the input from the keyboard into our name variable. And for this we have a built-in variable that GameMaker has that stores all of like the most recent key presses. And that is called keyboard string. Okay, so every step it's going to store name in keyboard string. Now let's draw the text to the screen. Sorry, I said that backwards. We want to store keyboard string in the name. So let's draw the text to the screen. And let's do draw text. Let's do extended transformed. That way we can really tell them exactly how we want our text to look down to the T. Okay, so where do we want to draw this text? Well, first, you know what? Let's align our text so that it goes to the right place, so that we know exactly where the origin of the text is. Draw text housekeeping, we'll call it, because these are functions you're going to have to use a lot if you're drawing text in your game. So the first thing we want to do is we want to set the alignment of the text. Okay, and where do we want that to align? So we want the horizontal alignment of the text to be towards the left. And that's a built-in constant, and this is a built-in function. If you just middle click it, it brings up the documentation. So if I say FA left, that means that the x-coordinate is going to be all the way over to the left of the text like this. You can say center to put it in the center. You can say right to put it over to the right. But no, we want FA left. And then we're just going to copy this line because we also want to set the vertical alignment. And for this, we want it to be, let's do FA top. And we're just going to make, okay. So now let's actually draw our text. So we have 10 million arguments down here. So we want our x-coordinate to be the left side of the box. So we have that right here. We can just copy that. And then we want our y-coordinate to be the top of the box. So we also have that right here. Awesome. And let's shift it over a little bit. That way it's not on the edge of the box and it won't look all weird. So let's shift it over to like 25 pixels. And so what are we storing, or sorry, what are we writing to the screen? Well, that's just going to be the string, our name that we're stored from the keyboard input. And we have a variable for that called name. Beautiful. And then the separation. How much space do we want between lines? Well, that doesn't matter because we want all of our text to be on one line. That way it all fits inside the box. So we'll just put in 100 for that. It doesn't matter. And the width says how big can our text be before we put it on a new line. And we don't want it to be on a new line. So we're just going to make this 2000. That sounds like a good number. Let's make this 1. Let's make this 1, 0, and 100, 2000. Let's just set the color to be safe. Draw, set, color. What color should we make this? Let's make it blue. That's a built-in constant. What else do we want to do to it? Why don't we create a font? And we'll just call it box font. And then we'll set it equal to 72 for the size. That looks good. Let's go back to our text box. Draw, set, font. And we'll call it box font. Let's try typing something. Beautiful. So beautiful, I'm at a loss for words. Okay. Obviously, there were a few different problems from when we were running that. Most notably, it runs over the box. So what we want to do is we want to limit how big our string can get. So let's get rid of, well, actually, we're just going to wrap this in an if statement. We're going to say if string length, and you can also do like the width on the screen of how big the text box is, but if you want to limit the number of characters that are in your string, this is a good way to do it too. String length name. How many characters do we want this to be? Let's say less than 20 is how many characters you can have. Okay, easy enough. Else, we're going to set the keyboard string to our name because we don't want it to increase anymore. And then we'll just swap these. Probably not the efficient way to do that. Name. It's just going to keep the name that we already have. and not increase anymore. Okay, let's run it. Let's make it 10 for now. That looks nice. Now you can't go off the screen. All right. So that's pretty well and good. So let's try and add a couple more features to our box. The first thing we want to do is we want to determine whether or not we can write in the box. And we won't want to do that until the user's actually clicked on it. So let's make a variable called Writable. And let's set that equal to, do we want them to be able to write at first? No, we don't want them to be able to write once we just start running it. We want them to be able to write once they've clicked on the box. If that, then we want to set our writable variable equal to true. Otherwise, if the player clicks and they click outside, then we want to set our writable variable equal to false. Because that's going to mean that you can. We only want this to happen if it's writable. Oh, sorry, this is mouse check button release. Yeah, if it highlights yellow, that means it actually has a function for us. And let's just fix that. Sorry about that. Okay, now we can only write in it if we've clicked. And if we click out, we can't write. If we click in, we can write again. So what do we want to do now? Now let's make a cursor. So the first thing we want to do is we want to create a little cursor icon. And we're just going to make that a string. And this string is going to be appended to the text that we draw to the screen. And we're just going to put it at the end of our string, at the end of our name string. So you can just do this little character here. And then let's go to the step event. And we're also going to want a timer to control how fast the cursor is blinking. One way to do that is with alarms, but usually a more efficient way than alarms is to actually control. So let's make it a default time. So let's just say def time. And then we'll just set that to 10 times 1 over the room speed. Again, the room speed is how fast the game is running. So we don't have to, we'll always make sure that this is measured in the same amount of seconds, because the room speed will be constant basically, or as the room speed changes, if your game starts to lag or it's not running at 60 FPS or whatever, this will accommodate for that. So that's why we have 1 over room speed. And then we're going to set our time equal to default time. So we want the time to be ticking down every step. So we're going to set time equal to minus equal to 1 over the room speed. Okay. So if the time is less than 0, then we're going to want to change our character for the cursor. And then I'll just show you what this looks like. So for 1 minute, it's the little line, and then when it gets to 0, then we're going to change it. We're going to blink it. So if time is less than 0, let's set, what's the name of our variable? Cursor. Let's set cursor equal to an empty string. And then we're gonna restart the timer. We'll set time equal to our def time. And then else if our time is greater than or equal to 0, and it's writable, we can type inside our box, then we're going to set our cursor equal to the character that we had at the create of the variable. Okay. So one thing we forgot to do is we forgot to concat. Concat means add strings together. We forgot to concatenate the string with our name to the cursor string. And we should do that where we draw our text, which is here. We want our cursor to be added at the end of our name. So we're going to do plus cursor. Let's run it. Okay. Now you can see it's blinking pretty fast. If we want to slow that right down, then we can go to our create event, which is where we specify the default time, which is set to every time it ticks down to 0. And we can make it like 30 or something like that. And let's initially make this blank. Because we don't want it to appear right away. Okay. Now if we click away, it goes away. So let's add one more feature. Let's make it so that if you hover over the box, then we get a cursor. So let's do, we don't want to put it in here because this only happens if we click the button. We want it to be if we just hovered over it, then do a certain type of behavior, aka change our cursor. So let's just do that right here. And then let's set our cursor. We'll use this function here, equal to CR beam. And I'll just show you this documentation here. Middle click. And there is CR beam. That's what it looks like. So otherwise, if we're not inside the rectangle, let's just set our cursor equal to the default. That way, when we come out of there, it's not going to keep it as a beam. Because this is sort of like turning on a switch. When we set it to that, it's going to stay as that. Let's run it. Okay, so there we go. We're bounded in the box. When we go over it, our cursor changes and it changes back. That is all looking good. So what's one more thing we could add? Let's just say if it's writable, we'll create another rectangle behind the one that we have. So let's do if writable. We'll draw another rectangle. And we can just copy this. And then we'll set it equal to that. And we're going to change all these to blue. Copy. And then we're going to set that equal to false because we want it to be right outside of our rectangle. Okay, so let's do minus, say, 320. And then we'll do minus 70, 320, 70. And this will just be a slightly bigger rectangle than the one that the text is drawn in. And this will sort of just create like a highlighted effect when we click on it. And then when it's not able to be written to, then it's just going to turn off again. So that's all fine. If you actually put this draw rectangle color after the draw event, this one here, then that would make it so that it covers up our initial rectangle, and we don't want that. We want it to be behind it. Okay, see? Okay, I think that's going to be it for this tutorial. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any questions about this tutorial or you'd like to see some different tutorials in the future, feel free to leave a comment. It was fun doing this. Stay tuned till next time, and we'll be doing some other stuff, some Let's Plays, some other GameMaker tutorials, all sorts of fun stuff. Hope you have a nice day. Thanks. Bye.